What's up, guys?
How's it going?
Oh my god, perfect unison. Well done. High five. Good high five, too, Ben. Already episode number 13. Everybody, welcome to Keep Pluggin, episode week number 13. Ben, how you...
number 13.
Lucky number 13. Ben, how you doing this week?
Great.
Wonderful to hear, Ben. Wonderful to hear. So, as we do every week,
Yes.
we're going to talk about... We're going to take a very quick
the
look
game
back.
Of the week.
The game of the week. We're going to take a look back into gaming history, and we're going to see what was happening this week in the history of video games. So, Ben, what do you have cooked up for us this week?
Yeah, we got a good one, and it's always cool. Like, I usually don't like anniversaries of just like every game ever, but in doing our segment of looking back, you actually start to learn them.
Yeah.
So this one's good. Smash Bros. 64.
I don't think that's something I ever would have known, but I'm happy we know it now.
April 26, 1999.
Happy birthday, Smash.
There you go.
All right, me and Smash are almost its birthday is like 9 days after mine, except I'm a little older. So hey, Smash is an April birthday from me to you. Happy birthday. So Super Smash Brothers, the original Super Smash Brothers on the N64, we should specify. What is there to say? I mean, it's, I think, for a lot of people, a very integral game to their childhoods, their college years. For a lot of us in this current generation of gaming, everyone has the story about when they first played Super Smash Brothers for the first time. So, Ben, what is your story?
Well, for me, I probably did play N64 first, but I don't think I got it. When I got it was Melee. And, like, going back to the 64 version, after playing all the other ones a lot more, it's kind of hard, especially with the N64 controller. I don't want to sound like I always shit on that controller, because it is dope.
It was a great controller at the time, but we've both kind of it definitely hasn't aged as gracefully as some other Nintendo controllers, but it is such a great controller.
Yeah, revolutionary, even though it looks crazy.
It looks like
you got to understand why they did that, because they didn't know 2D games wouldn't be made really for the system.
They didn't, and they also the idea of, you got to keep in mind, when that console came out, the idea of dual analog sticks was something that hadn't even been heard of. I mean, they were literally the first console to even have a analog stick. It was a weird experimental time. I mean, we were actually just playing a little bit of Super Mario 64, which, as you guys know, was the flagship game. We weren't playing on an N64. We'll get into that later, though. But even the idea of having a camera, they had to justify that by having it be like a character in game. Like these ideas and concepts were very new. So N64 controller, we love you.
Yeah.
If we're mean, it's only because it comes from a good place. It comes from
a good place.
It's constructive. All right, so getting back on.
But that controller, it works well with Smash Bros. I think
it does.
The main complaint would just be not tight sticks on those controllers, but
that would be the main.
The game definitely works, lacking the second camera stick, because it's a 2D fighting game, I guess.
It does lack. It's hard because now that second stick has become very, even if obviously there's no camera controls, it's become very integral to Smash for different reasons.
Do you know what the C buttons do in Smash 64?
I actually don't remember.
I forget.
I do wish. I don't know if you had a copy handy. We should have tested that out before we started talking. But I do remember there was something. It might have even just been. I think you might have even just pressed it them, and it was another way to do the shield. If I remember, a lot of that like mechanic, like it wasn't like it is now, where like the second stick or the C stick acts as like a charge up attack, which I believe that was only something in the Wii U version, right? That wasn't present in Melee or Brawl, correct?
Yeah, because it would the C stick in Melee for sure. The GameCube controller,
right,
that had the C stick going on with the smash attacks.
You're right. I think that might have been something they took away from Brawl and then brought back. It is weird to go back to this game now, because they have so further refined it, and we, I think, all kind of grew up on the Melees and the Brawls.
And Smash Wii U is like so efficient and like snappy to play. Like there's no, it's the most crisp, fluid fighting game I've played.
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, there's a reason it's basically taken over. I mean, it was all Melee in the tournament play community for years, and there's a reason that Smash 4, which is what people colloquially call Super Smash Brothers for Wii U, has taken over that scene, because it plays perfectly. It plays so well. It is like fighting game perfect almost. Super Smash Brothers the original isn't that way, but it's such a fun game. So I want to say, so when you said get it, you didn't mean like you owned the game. You owned the game, but you didn't get it, quote unquote, until...
Yeah, I meant more as like I didn't understand how to do the mechanics until I was older and played Melee.
I gotcha. Melee was amazing too. I remember I have so many fond experiences of those first two games in particular because I don't think I've ever really told you this, but my main times with those games were with my friend John Probert, who he owned an N64 and a GameCube. Getting back into it, as I've said many times, I didn't really get on that N64 PlayStation generation of consoles. I was more of a PS2 guy. But I played a lot at other people's houses, and Smash Brothers was definitely one of those games. Even a couple years back, when you did the first Key Plug-in annual event, I remember me and John came with me, and we started playing Super Smash Brothers on the N64, and it felt like I was five again playing in his
Yeah.
house. And he plays Kirby every time, and he kicked my ass, and I'd start screaming. And except now I was 23 instead of like 6, and there was kids around, and they looked a little
Hmm.
upset. But other than that, it was exactly the same. That game is very timeless in a really cool way. Even if the N64 controller itself hasn't aged well, like Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, maybe more Mario 64 than Ocarina of Time, although that game still plays well. The best games in the N64 work with so well with that controller, and that's absolutely Smash. If you're a serious seasoned tournament player, it's not going to be the first way you play. It's not going to be your preferred way to play. But as a nostalgist, as someone who loves the history of video games, and someone who really appreciates the feeling of going back to a game that meant so much to you, I always love going
Hmm.
back to the original Smash.
And seeing the roots of something is always great to go back to that.
It is. It is. So, what do you on that note? Because I know you've actually played a lot more of the later Smashes than I have, and
Hmm.
in general too. I would say not to beat up on myself, but you are by far the more experienced Smash player. So, in those ways, what do you see in terms of the series roots, and what do you see in terms of like the ways that like fundamentally the series needed to grow when you look back at the first Smash specifically?
Well, like we were saying, it's hard to go back to the old mechanics because it's become much more refined.
Hmm.
And I guess 64 is more conducive to like playing with friends and having that couch multiplayer.
It is more of a party game almost.
And the new ones, like especially the newest one, is much more conducive to tournament play. I think that's more their focus in the development of it too. Like each one had that different thing in mind when they were making it.
That's true. That's true. Especially you're right. This most recent one for Wii U, they absolutely had tournament play in mind. I mean, a lot of the customization options, a lot of the options, a lot of the changes with the iframes, the invisibility frames, a lot of the a lot of the mechanics that they messed around with, both on a front door, visible level, as well as just the mechanics of fighting.
Hmm.
It's all conducive of making a highly customizable experience that's perfect for tournament play. Whereas again, yeah, playing Smash Brothers, it's just a lot of fun to beat up on your friends.
But
But
it still has that other aspect. It doesn't lose either one.
you're right, it doesn't, because it is absolutely still so much fun to just do that when you play Smash Brothers for Wii U and any game in the series. But it is weird how as it went along, it became that more and more. I remember specifically talking about my experience. For me, that was a bit of a turnoff because as someone who didn't always own Nintendo consoles and wasn't playing as religiously as other people, it would get hard sometimes because you would play against someone who was really good,
Hmm.
and it would be kind of like detrimental, or not detrimental, but it would be aggravating when like you felt like you ran up against someone that you just couldn't beat.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's a good game for everyone. Still has fun even if you lose.
It is, and I will say this. I mean, I found those people in my life, and every time I felt that way, it did make me want to play, and more often than not, I eventually ended up getting my satisfaction in beating them.
Hmm.
Maybe I didn't win every time, but I did at least get to win.
And in terms of like the evolution of the series, even more than the refining of the mechanics, the character choice has gone up
Oh,
exponentially
absolutely.
from like 12 to 50 something.
I forgot it's like that small. You're right. In the first one, I think there's like what I think four unlockable characters. It's
Yeah.
Luigi. I forgot Luigi's an unlockable character even in that first game.
Not even Bowser's in it.
Oh, Bowser. You're right. No, isn't Luigi an unlockable character in that game?
I think Luigi is not Bowser though
Okay, Bowser is no Bowser's a main fighter.
in Melee.
Yeah. Oh, in
No, I'm
Melee or
saying he's not in 64 at all.
oh, God, you're right. He's not. He was introduced in Melee. You're right. I forgot. So who was it? I know it was Mario, Link, Kirby, Samus. Who else was it in the original one?
Captain Falcon,
Captain Falcon,
Jigglypuff.
Jigglypuff. That's the main thing I think of though when we talk about this is that they have become these feature rich experiences where they're not just for tournament play. They're not just for this. Like that series with every entry has become more and more of. There's been some experiments like the subspace emissary or whatever it was in remember that in Brawl, like the weird
Yeah,
like abstract kind of like story mode.
they didn't even bother doing a single player this time.
They were just like, all right, let's just make the multiplayer perfect for people again because I know there was some backlash against Brawl, even though I love that game. But I don't know. Even with the lack of maybe single player in Wii U, I think the whole series there's so much in every game, and it does kind of add. I mean, even if they take something away, like they take away the Brawl campaign, they add so many features back into the Wii U version that like the Smash Brothers, for my money, pound for pound, has some of the best value in
Oh yeah,
the Nintendo catalog.
endless hours.
Even if you're not a big online multiplayer person, even if you're not a big tournament person, even if you're not someone who's going to play all the time necessarily with friends, that game gives you so much value. Like the amount
Hmm.
of hours I got out of the first game with my buddy John at his house. Frankly, it's probably more than I spend on some single player games I play now.
It's like in the intro to the original game. It's just a toy box. You
It,
go in there and just you have your imagination and all these tools to have fun. And you just go for it.
it's so true, and it obviously was very very influential because we haven't maybe had that many. We've had some mascot fighters. They've been hit or miss, but that idea of the openly being about the toy box idea of gaming, I think that's such an integral idea to gaming. I don't know that that's something that Super Smash Brothers necessarily created or introduced. I think that was present long before, but you're right. That game is a toy box, and in so many ways, my favorite games are too. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now that we've been talking about what we was in the past, you want to hear what I've been playing?
Yeah, hit it. Lay it on me.
All right, Ben. So I alluded to the fact that I got this game a little bit last week, but for my birthday, I did get the game Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, this has been a big game. Came out right before Zelda. There was a lot of Zelda versus Horizon Zero Dawn talk, too, a couple weeks back ago when we kind of broke down the whole thing behind the Jim Sterling controversy. I know that was one of the things that we mentioned. Horizon Zero Dawn has come up a couple times, too, but we haven't really ever sat down and talked about the game, in part because we haven't played it. So I played about 3 hours of it over 2 days. It's really fun. I actually played like 2 hours of it last night because I remember very specifically I was like, I need to play a lot of this game before the podcast.
Hmm.
And it was such a cool feeling because it's like I'm playing this game to do something that like is also.
Yeah.
It was such a cool feeling of like I have like a real reason to play this game. I'm not just playing this game,
There you go.
even though I love just playing games for the sake of it. But getting into it, my initial opinions were a little bit more mixed. So the first night I played the game, it was a little scattershot. I was kind of pausing the game, picking it back up because I was doing laundry, I was working on some personal stuff. It wasn't like necessarily a straight down play session. It was kind of like a haphazard one. And that wasn't necessarily to the game's benefit because I don't want to focus too much on the Zelda Horizon Zero Dawn comparison because I do think
Hmm.
it's a little played out. And frankly, I think it's a little unfair to both games. But one thing I will say, coming off of, I think I'm at 95 hours right now in Zelda. Coming off 95 hours of Zelda, it was a little staggering because the game has a little bit more of a story focus in terms of it has like that slower kind of old Zelda type opening,
Hmm.
though not exactly. It has a little bit of like a Great Plateauish type section called the Embrace.
I gotcha.
So there's like a maybe half hour opening segment that's like very linear, Uncharted like. The game's beautiful, by the way, too. Like its
Hmm.
graphics are comparable to Uncharted, and it's an open world game, which, whew, that's pretty cool. But after that section, you get into this area called the Embrace. And it's a little weird because again, we talked about this a bit last week when you were playing the Dragon Age Heroes game, but Zelda has kind of trained us to think about how we interact in an open world in a certain way. Specifically, you can climb any object, you can, sail certain areas. Like there is this sense of verticality in the exploration. You're not limited in the way that maybe you are in some other open world games. Horizon's not like that. Horizon is very much so in that more traditional style of open world.
Hmm.
And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all necessarily, but it is a little bit of, I don't want to say a come down, but an adjustment.
Hmm.
For instance, there's this one section in the game where you have to do this side mission where you have to like climb up this mountain and go to this like altar for this like kooky lady. There's a lot of fun side missions. I'll get to that in a second. But I went to approach it the way I would Zelda. I was trying to just like climb up, and I
Really?
realized, oh, I can't do that. So the way the climbing works in the game, it's like Uncharted. There's like these yellow sections. You can climb up them. You have to climb a certain way.
So there's climbing, but it's more like preconceived, like Assassin's Creed or Uncharted.
Yes, exactly. Even more so like Uncharted, I'd say, because Assassin's Creed, it is preconceived, but you can still at least climb up different angles and do certain things. There's more
And they
control.
apply it to most structures.
Exactly. It's literally just some rocks, and you have to be on the lookout for these yellow highlights. Literally, exactly like in The Last of Us or Uncharted. You have
Hmm.
to look for the color coded objects that say this is where you can climb. So I was doing that, and I got up to the top, and then I saw like the way I was supposed to go, and I figured, you know what? Let's try climbing up the rest of this mountain. And for about a minute, I was just bumbling around, just jumping up and down as the character, trying to make this work. And I was like, wait, why am I doing this? And I was
Hmm.
finally, it kind of settled in on me. I kind of realized it, and then right at that time, it was like crazy. Like it was just one thing after another. I see that there's this amazing canvas in the opening of the game. There's this amazing skybox. It's like a mountain, and there's like this giant, like dead mechanical, like spidery creature on it. Because you know the whole point of the game is that it's like
Is that your
machines.
first encounter with that?
Yeah, it's not even something you can. It's literally a skybox.
Oh, okay.
And I remember I looked it up online because I'm like, that's so cool. When can I go to that? And it was like, oh, you can't go to that. That's just like a thing. And I was like, oh, because again, Zelda,
And
like
that's so unlike what you're used to right now.
exactly. And look, I know if there's anything we're guilty of on this podcast, it's talking about Zelda endlessly. So I don't want to add, and especially with this game, I think it has suffered from those comparisons
And
because
they came out like on the same day or something, right? Same
like
week.
a week before, like literally, it came out like a week or two. I
Do you
think.
think they
Before.
wanted to do that strategically, or it was just like they didn't pay attention?
Well, no one. I don't think anyone knew when Zelda was coming out. I think it just kind of happened. I could have.
True. Zelda was pretty recent.
Yeah,
Like before it came out, they announced it.
yeah. You got to keep in mind, Zelda was literally announced like in January to be coming out.
Horizon probably had plans, and they were like, "Oh shit."
I'm sure they knew a couple weeks ahead of time. I can imagine that. Imagine that meeting. Like you're in Sony and you hear Zelda's about to drop a week after your game. And you're like, fuck, god damn it. But I will say this: they're actually in practice when you get into it very different games, and I'll explain why. So I talked for a bit about how the exploratory elements aren't quite at that level, but the thing about the game that I love that actually makes it kind of a perfect antidote coming off Zelda
Uh-huh.
is this really great emphasis on character and story. Not to say that Zelda doesn't have a really cool story and a really interesting way of characterizing all the different people, but it is more, I think, gameplay focused than this game is. I think this game has a little bit more of a broader reaching narrative that takes place front and center as opposed to the subtle type of narrative that Zelda goes for.
I see.
And I kind of like that coming off Zelda because in particular it adds up to a couple nice things.
Hmm.
Number one, the main character Alloy is fucking fantastic. I really like her characterization. I told you this actually a bit back in the day, but you know Ashley Birch from Hey Ash, What You Playing is the main character.
Really?
She is phenomenal in the role. Like I could totally see her being nominated for like a GDC award for like best voice acting of the year.
She's living her dream.
She's really living her dream. Like she's obviously her character is actually really funny at times, which I wasn't expecting because I saw a bunch of trailers and stuff for this game, and like the characters seemed to talk very stiffly, and it was all about the old ones and the old days and the machines that roam these lands now. It seemed very like kind of melodramatic, and
Hmm.
there is a certain like kind of melodrama in the game, but it is a little goofy. Like it kind of knows that like it's silly, like it has a certain sense of self awareness to it,
Hmm.
and like they really work. Even if the story itself is a little like cliche, bad guy, good guy, at least in the opening hours, the characters are what sells it because you do have this really smart, dedicated protagonist who, without going into it, basically she's an outcast in her tribe her whole life and she doesn't really know why. There's a lot of interesting things they do with the character that they set it up where from the get-go you emphasize with her, you empathize with her, you want to see her succeed, and a lot of it is because I think Ashley Birch is such a naturally likable person.
Hmm.
She adds a lot of that gusto and charisma to the character that makes you like really like her. The other thing is, even though the game has like a really like good fleshed out protagonist, it also has an amazing world of side characters. So In the opening hours of the game, you do this one side mission where you're playing. You're basically tasked by this woman to find her brother, who is also an outcast of the tribe, and he's been outcast for 10 years because he's a little mentally challenged.
Hmm.
He basically ended up hurting someone in the tribe, and he got cast out for it. Um, it's more like he's schizophrenic almost when you find him, but you basically end up tracking the guy. There's a really cool mechanic too, even if it feels a little bit like you're just kind of going from A to B. Like you can highlight and track. You have this little like piece of like technology because it is like a caveman type game, but it's like post civilization falling. So you find like awesome future tech at the beginning of the game.
Hmm.
You get this little like earpiece thing that
It's
like
weird how many lines you can draw to Zelda.
yeah it
Is
is
that
like
it's the
Zelda in
same
that way.
concept?
Exactly, and then your character mainly uses a bow and arrow. She has a spear, and there is no weapon durability. You just have one weapon.
Hmm.
One thing I will say as a sidebar, I like the game's combat. The bow is really nice, but you have to draw it. Like it's not just like Zelda where you can just pull an arrow back immediately.
Hmm.
You have to press the left bumper to raise your arrow. No, the left trigger to like raise your bow, right trigger to like knock an arrow, basically.
Hmm.
Because R1 and R2 are like your light and heavy attacks on your spear. The square is randomly like the crouch button, which
Isn't that kind of how you aim first-person shooters?
it is kind
Both
of
triggers.
yeah, it is. It is exactly like that. And Far Cry 3, which I know you didn't play, even though you did get your hair cut to look just like the character
Oh
from Far
yeah,
Cry 3.
wow.
I don't think we ever talked about it on podcast, but that's
Yeah,
an
that's good.
amazing. Oh man, we got to go into that. Ben got his hair cut off. You got your hair cut off, but you were PAX a
Oh
couple
yeah.
years back, right?
Yeah, I was at the PAX convention a few years ago when Far Cry 3 was about to come out, and they had a thing going on where if you got your head shaved in a mohawk, like it was the main enemy, right? Not the protagonist,
Yeah, it was like the main
the
enemy.
sketchy evil guy. And so I got a mohawk, and they never sent me the game. I had to badger Ubisoft and like
That's
contact them
right.
online and get
Yeah,
them to send me the game.
and then you ended up selling it for another game, right?
And then yeah, they sent me a sealed Far Cry 3, and I traded it to Target to get Bioshock Infinite.
Although that is an amazing trade. I cannot fault you on that trade, but I
It was worth it.
Far Cry 3 is a great game though. You should definitely play it. So I keep saying that to you, but I think maybe like once a month I say that to you. But really fast, just kind of wrap up.
Hmm.
I like some elements of it. Like the combat's a little clunky at times. Crouching into stealth sometimes gets me messed up just because it's not like an analog trigger or an analog toggle rather. You don't click down. You have to press the square button, which is like normally reload or like attack in other action games. So some of the control mapping took me a bit to get used to, but like
It's the kind of thing where if you play it for long enough, it might become second nature and really feel good.
and that was exactly what was happening, particularly during getting back on track this mission. Because like I said, I was looking around for this guy, following his tracks, and you keep finding these blood spots. You think for a second, oh my god, did like the people from the tribe like get him? Did they kill him? And you end up finding it's just him, and he's like really mentally deranged. Like there's something wrong with him in the head. And his sister comes, and you're faced with this like Bioware level moral dilemma of like his sister wants to take him back to the tribe. He wants to basically like kill himself because he's like afraid that like he's gonna hurt his sister or hurt somebody. You even find him. He like mutilated a bunch of animals. Like it's a little dark, but like it does a
Hmm.
really good job of setting up like an actual moral dilemma. And I remember up until that point, I was just kind of playing the game, and when that happened, it hit me, and I was like, oh god. Like I felt like my pulse. I was like, oh man, like
Hmm.
that really got me. And then from there, I was basically hooked. And I like that. I like that idea of a game that has maybe some of the exploratory elements that Zelda does, but it's a little bit more grounded. It's more based on your interaction with the human characters as well as these like mechanized beasts. Like later on in the game, you get the ability to control the beast. You get the ability to do stealth kills. Something I don't like about the game to wrap up real fast. So there's like an entire skill tree in the game, as well as a bunch of like mechanics. Like I said, like there's like that stealth kill. So those are all locked behind this skill tree, kind of in the same way that we never played Just Cause 3 proper, but in the main Just Cause 3 game, like if you zoom in, like the ability to zoom in on your weapons is locked behind a skill tree, which I think is the dumbest thing. This game does the exact same thing, where like certain things that are like integral to the gameplay are locked behind a skill tree.
Well, that's weird.
Yeah, and then on top of that too, it never explains that there's a skill tree in the game. Like in the tutorial section, it's never like use your skills to get better at hunting things. Like there's no like
It's like they couldn't think of enough things to unlock, so they just took the mechanics, blocked them behind doors.
yeah, I mean, but like that's like also very standard game design. The fact that they don't even explain that it exists is like egregious to me. Because like,
Yeah.
let's face it, I one of the cool things about like Zelda is that like yeah, there are these like cool like hidden mechanics you learned, but the game teaches you everything you need to know in the opening section more or less. Like,
Yeah.
or at least it
In
gives you
terms
the
of aiming a weapon.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's nothing exactly like you maybe learn some things trial by fire, but like there's nothing really important that the game like waits to tell you.
Hmm.
Horizon kind of does that, and that's maybe one of the few negatives I have about it. But overall, after I beat Zelda, I definitely think it's the next on my playlist. I would actually, you know what, sometime the next few weeks, I would even love to do a let's play with you on it because I really think it's a game you would enjoy.
I'm down.
All right, awesome.
That
On
was
that,
a good review
thank
of
you.
your play so far. I'm interested to try it.
Thank you, Ben. I'm happy you are.
Yeah.
We're definitely tell you what, we're definitely gonna do that the next time we do a let's play session.
Cool.
Awesome. So on the note of Ben playing things, what is Ben playing? This I was gonna make a rhyme, but there's nothing that rhymes with play. I'm sorry.
There's nothing that rhymes with play.
Well, there are things that rhymes with play, but I don't think they would be appropriate.
What are you gonna say?
Oh, god damn it. Okay, well done.
Well, been just dabbling in a few classics. You know, I have the NES Mini going on, and I got the hack all the way done.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
So what have you been
So
playing on the hacked NES?
right now I've been doing mostly Super Nintendo games. I've been going through some levels in Yoshi's Island, which is an all-time favorite for me,
All right.
and just like, oh man, can't gush about that game enough. It's got best music in a video game of all time, probably. Graphics amazing. There's that like urban gaming legend about how Miyamoto got like people weren't liking the cartoony style,
Oh yeah.
or like it was something about the Donkey Kong Country looking realistic, having like
Oh,
3D renders,
right,
and
right.
Miyamoto was like, nah, fuck that, I'm doing cartoon like crayon graphics.
I think we talked about this a couple weeks back, but reportedly he hated that. Like he hated like the claymation style of Donkey Kong.
Reportedly.
Reportedly.
I mean, personally, I'm not too fond of it either. It looks kind of muddy to me.
Hmm.
Those are good games, great games, but graphics wise, I prefer cartoony, bright Yoshi's Island.
I love maybe just because I think more of like the later N64 rare style. I do like that kind of style, but I understand why someone would think especially it looks a little muddy. Getting back on Yoshi's Island though, I know that might be the Mario game I've played the least of. I played like the advanced version.
Hmm.
It was Super Mario Advance 2, right? I think
Oh yeah, I'm so confused about those numberings,
Yeah.
but they're all messed up.
maybe it was 3. I don't.
It's also it's Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island.
That's
It was
right.
like Super Mario Advanced 4 something. I don't know. No,
But-
4 is 3. It's all messed up.
So I think the full title was Super Mario Advanced 3 Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island.
Right? That's insane.
I don't think that's actually what they called it, but that's amazing when you think about it that way.
But yeah, it's got amazing game design. It's like so perfectly done. I love like there's no health bar or anything. You have the timer for Baby Mario because you're delivering Baby Mario, and like every level is you're a different color Yoshi. You pass the baby off to each one. Also, it's also cool how it is like a prequel to Mario World
That's
because he's a
right.
baby. Shows their like conception.
It's his like origin story.
Yeah,
It's Mario's kind of his origin story.
it is.
It is.
Stork. There's a stork. He drops him on the Yoshi's Island.
That's amazing, and Yoshi's like his protector and like his caretaker. That adds so many shades. Like you can tell every time they look at each other after that. It's like this is my guardian, my friend Yoshi. It
It's
really,
true. Couldn't have him without Yoshi. But yeah, just great game all around, and it's also just like a collectathon. Like I loved Woolly World on Wii U. It was a great kind of spiritual sequel to Yoshi's Island.
How are they collectathons? Because again, I'm remembering a little bit, but mostly my memories of Yoshi's Island are Baby Mario crying in the little
Yeah.
bubble and desperately trying to get him back. So explain it to me a little bit.
Well, it's like each level has 5 flowers, five red coins or something like that, and like if you do it with full stars, which is basically full health. So it's more like a lot of them are finding them in the level, but some are just like conditions you have to have when you beat the level. And if you do all the conditions, you'll get a secret level at the end of each world.
Oh,
So it's like 100% in the game has a pretty good incentive because you get actual more levels that are really hard, awesome levels.
that's really cool. That would make sense too. I guess that's where one of the more modern Mario games I played a lot of with you is Super Mario 3D World. That has a lot of elements of that with like the conditions and things you have to do. It's a little bit
Yeah,
more
yeah,
like special stars and stuff, but I like that element of like skill. So that was the game that kind of brought that element of like the the super secret like 100% things you had to do if you were like a really great Mario player.
hmm
That's pretty cool. I would love to do I'd love to play a little bit more of it with you on your. Wait a minute, Ben. We might have buried the lead here a little bit, but you're playing that game. Isn't that a Super Nintendo game?
yeah, man.
But you have it on your NES.
I hacked the NES Mini.
You most certainly did. But do you want to explain that in a little bit more detail? Because
Of
now that I'm
course,
thinking
of
about
course.
it, it's blowing my mind, bro.
No, it is pretty awesome, and you gotta have the Wii Classic controller because it has the sticks and the four buttons, so you can't use the NES for the other systems. But I got Super Nintendo, I got more NES on there, and I got a Genesis game and some N64 games.
That
And
is,
we tried Conker's Bad Fur Day.
we did.
That was horrendous.
It was the best experience of my life. We're also the worst. Oh man, like Conquer, like his polygons on like one side of his face were still like it looked like he had like third degree burns almost. Like he looked deformed and like the N64 logo at the beginning when he saw us do it was like glitching out. Like it was.
It was more like the Grudge or the Ring or something.
We should really whenever we end up investing in HDMI capture equipment so we can get everything from all the different games.
Yeah,
One of the first things I want to do is do a playthrough of like the like crappy like ROM of Conquer.
that could be actually funny.
It could be amazing. Because I love those videos of like the hacked like fucked up like 64 Mario 64s and Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Times. We should add something to that. You know, we should become part of that lexicon. I think it's our
But yeah, as bad as Conker was, Mario 64 ran pretty amazing. And I guess that's just maybe because that game is just wonderfully made. I don't know why that one works amazing and Conker's works horribly.
it wonderfully made, but also it was like the launch game for the system. I think it was very much so designed to take advantage of the hardware, and
But this isn't the hardware; it's emulated.
it was. But I don't know, maybe just something about the way that game was constructed. It was supposed to be a little bit more. I don't want to say simplistic, but it was definitely designed to work easier. I think on the hardware, so maybe it makes sense that runs better than something like Conker's Bad Fur Day, which came a little bit later in the generation.
hmm
Or maybe it's just like one's a really good ROM, one's a shitty ROM. So
Who knows?
explain it to me. I think you might have mentioned it a little bit more, but for my own sake, more than maybe the listeners, um, explain it to me again. So is it? It's not like a package. You still have to individually download the ROMs. It's from a
Yeah.
website. It's from a
Well,
platform.
you have freedom to download whatever you want, but I did find a package.
Oh,
There's a pretty helpful YouTube video I found, and he just had like a link in the description where he made a zip file of like hundreds of ROMs that he found and the program that hacks the NES, which is honestly amazing. And all these they're called modules, and they're like emulators within the NES
oh wow.
hack emulation that like run the N64 games and run the NES games, all the other games that aren't NES.
Interesting. So there's like a separate emulator, basically one that's running for the N64, one that's running for like the SNES and so forth.
Yeah,
Kind
you
of
have to install them onto the NES,
interesting.
and but like whoever made this program is awesome. Like I have Windows XP, and there were some hurdles I had to get through, and like installing some of the drivers didn't work. But once I got past that, the actual program was just awesome. Like you just see it just picks up all the ROMs on your computer. You see a list of every game, and then you just click synchronize with NES. You plug it straight into the computer with the USB, and it just installs all the games.
It's amazing. So it just automatically, you don't have to like import them. It just automatically detects the ones that are on your computer,
Yeah.
puts them all on there.
Or you can import them if you want. Like
Oh,
some of them might have issues. You could just put that in by itself, and it's a pretty great program.
that is awesome, dude. And in general too, as much as I want to talk your head off for another 10 minutes, I think one of the things that we wanted to talk about when you were telling me about this and we were kind of discussing it pre-show was we ended up talking not just about this but about the idea of emulation the idea of these kind of console hacks in general, because this is something we've kind of talked about a couple times on the show. I know we've mentioned like hardware hacks. Like I've mentioned that you retrofitted your Game Boy Advance to have like the brightened SP screen. You have the BS Legend of Zelda, which itself
Yeah,
is
that's
like
more of a mod
it's more of a
than a
mod.
hack,
It's a mix of like a mod and hack though. But I
but
mean,
still.
but still, but at the same time, on the other end, I mean, the idea of what a hack is and a mod is can kind of intersect, and it's like a very broad spear because there are software hacks like the NES. There's hardware hacks like what you did with your Game Boy Color. And then obviously emulation in and of itself. It's not necessarily a hack, but you are kind of running it not the way the game was intended. And it is kind of going over and around the initial design.
Well, actually, there is a message on. I read that when they hacked the NES Classic, there's a message within the code from Nintendo that said like, "Be careful in here." Like they knew completely that people would hack it.
Oh well, companies absolutely know people are going to do it anyway. But
It's cool that they put that in there. Like we know.
I wonder what else they put. I wonder like maybe you're going to put. I hope you're not putting something on one day and like it self destructs on you.
No, I think they're cool with it.
I think they are too, to the most part. I mean, they let Dolphin, which was like the GameCube emulator, go on forever. There's what is it, CMU, the Wii U emulator. Like they don't kill these things, and they could probably. Maybe they can't because they're not really. I don't know about that. Like the legality about like could Nintendo do a cease and desist and stop the Wii U emulator that's going around right now? Because that I mean, people can run Breath of the Wild on their computers with that thing right now, basically.
Yeah, they can.
Do they have like a legal ground for that? And
I don't know.
I don't know. Going backwards to something cool that I know you and I wanted to talk about was the Wii, because I know we both did a lot of emulation and a lot of hacking with the Wii. So you had the homebrew channel, right?
Yeah, the Wii was much harder than the NES, but I got you get like the SD card and you do it on the computer and then you put the software into the Wii. But I also got the hard drive, and yeah, the homebrew channel lets you put on a whole bunch of stuff. But I got the program that lets you install discs onto the Wii.
Yeah.
So then I would just have this hard drive, and I got every Wii game from our local library, and installed it. Like I would take out 3 games at a time and just install them, and then go back like every other day.
I remember like one of the first times you and I were hanging out post high school. I came over your house and you were like, "Oh, do you want to play Wii?" And you just had like all these games, and I was like, I didn't even know some of these. Like you had like I think Mario
Yeah,
Galaxy 2. I was like, they digitally released that game, and you're like, "Oh no, I have like a hack right
yeah.
now. I have everything."
So I have
And
like a 200 gig hard drive, which is every Wii game on it.
and you can literally play any Wii game you want right now. Like you could
Yeah.
say you wanted to play World of Goo or like the Conduit. You could play any Wii game you
Oh, the
want.
conduit. Yeah. It's also cool because I sell games and resell them, and I can just install every Wii game I get and put it through my system and sell it.
All right. And I mean that's awesome, but obviously that's a little bit different than like the homebrew channel was more like you could play like old Windows games. Like I remember you could play like Quake 2 if you wanted on like the homebrew
Yeah.
channel and stuff. Like
You
that
can install other emulators as well.
you could install with other emulators. I think there was like an NES one, right? Maybe was there an NES one? Maybe I'm making that up.
There is. You could play every system.
Oh, awesome. You're right. Yes, there was. I
That
haven't
was a
played
whole nother process though. At the time, I just wanted to get the Wii games.
on that subject. So now thinking about it, obviously you've been doing this for a while now. I think 2011, 2012 is when you first did this hack. So do you ever have times now where you think like I have all these games and I didn't pay the creators? I mean, because we're older now, obviously. We kind of understand more creating our own content, the sweat and tears and work that go into it. I mean, we're doing podcasts and videos as opposed to making a freaking game. I mean, do you ever have a moment where you think I kind of wish I had bought these games, or do you kind of go back and buy the games anyway if you really want to support them? How do you feel about all that?
Yeah, I pretty much bought every game that I really love, and all the Wii games like World of Goo and like Pajama Sam, or like all the horrible ones like Gingerbread Man. Just all the shovelware for Wii. Never would have bought those. So it's pretty much I have them or I don't. I have them free or I
Yeah.
don't. So like yeah, a lot of it is games that I would never have bought anyway. And I do tend to support the ones I love. So it doesn't make much of a difference in terms of my market share.
Oh, and I mean, and that's cool. That is one thing I do appreciate about you is that you are the kind of person that when you really love something and support it, even if you don't get it from legal means, like I know you've done this even with like movies and games and particularly CDs. I know there's times that we've gotten a pirated version of a CD from like our friend, and you've gone out and then bought the physical version. I think a lot of people are that way. Like they have a sense of morality where it's like, if I like this person, I want to support their music, I will go out and physically buy it if I have the means.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I do also feel like as I get older, I understand. For me as a consumer, it's only beneficial to have like all the Wii games I want, or to
Yeah.
be able to go on the Pirate Bay and get any movie or TV show I want. But I, I don't know. I do feel like as I've gotten older, I have kind of thought about it and been like, I don't know about that. Especially because there are sometimes situations like you remember old friend Jim Sterling, the guy who did
Yeah.
the Breath of the Wild review. This is a crazy thing he did. And again, I'm not bringing this up in a critical way, just to kind of inside conversation. Did you know that a couple weeks before that review, in a video, he basically said, because of Nintendo's practices, he said, "I would never tell you to do this." But then he went, but then he was like, "But if you were to do it," he basically said, "I would never tell you to pirate or emulate all the games that Nintendo sells on its virtual console because they're just ROMs. But if you wanted to, you could go to this website." And he like gave people like the way to do it in the video.
Yeah. Nintendo also sells the same ROMs that people use on the internet.
That's the big thing too. I'm trying to get into with this, which is like Nintendo in particular has caught some flack because I know you brought this up like a while back on the podcast. A couple of their games were caught on the virtual console. They're basically just straight rips of the ROM, right?
Yeah, they were caught red-handed because they had lines of code from the fan-made NES emulators in them.
Jeez. So in a case where Nintendo does something like that, do you feel a little bit less, particularly with like something like this with the NES Classic, with these older games, particularly when they pulled the bullshit they did with the NES Classic? And I'm sorry, but I understand the reasons. I do think it is bullshit, but when they just pulled the system the way they did, and we don't even know, we might get an SNES Classic this year, but and on top of that, there's all these ROM things. Do you not really feel like you're doing anything wrong by doing this, or is it just kind of not a factor for you?
It's not really a factor. I find it really fun to actually do the hack,
Mhm.
and now that I've done it and have the games, I don't feel guilty at all. And I'm also, as of yet, I'm just playing games I already own anyway.
That's true.
So it's more for posterity, and it's just awesome to have them all in the little NES box.
Oh,
But in terms of like emulation in general, I don't really have many qualms about it. And like I said, I tend to support the artists that I like. So if I steal something now and again, not too upset.
and I look. I think the thing is that's the reality of the world we live in now. Everyone, it's so easy. Anyone can do it, and as much as the FBI scares us straight about it. I mean, the consequences, as long as you know what you're doing, are fairly limited. It's a reality of life, but as long as I think you're taking the steps to support the people that you care about, I think you're doing right by them. Buy the game if you love the game, buy the CD, buy the Blu-ray if you're someone like me who doesn't really like. I don't really like the idea of buying a digital copy of like a movie. I would much rather have a physical one. So do that, and then maybe instead of downloading it, use the digital download or whatever. Like,
Yeah, and a lot of times, honestly, it's not even that I want to support them. It's that I want the physical copy. Like I'm a
yes,
fan enough to actually. Sometimes I emulate something or steal it, and then also get the real thing, just because I want it in every aspect.
exactly my point. Like I say that I just watched the movie Steve Jobs. I really liked that movie. I didn't love it. I watched that on HBO though. I watched that legally. But say that I hadn't. Say that I had pirated it. If I loved it, in a heartbeat, I would have bought that movie.
Yeah,
And I've done that with most movies I own. I did
use
that
it as a preview.
exactly. And I think that is in this day and age especially, that is conscious. That is being a conscious consumer. There are still some cases where I maybe will avoid pirating it if I don't have to, but I understand when it happens, and of course I do it myself.
And I would also, I'm not about to pirate Breath of the Wild, but I would definitely pirate the, NES ROMs.
Oh,
It's not like they're really for sale besides the virtual console.
yeah, and I mean, it's hard too because those virtual console games are fairly, even though they're they're great games and you get a lot of value out of them. It's hard when the game's that old and there's already so much money that's been made off of it. It is kind of hard to justify paying $5 to $6 a pop for it, and especially too with what's going to be going on with the Nintendo online service. Like, I'm gonna love playing those games for the month that I have them. You know, the and what I'm saying I should specify is the free NES and SNES games they're going to be giving out the service. Excuse me. I could see myself maybe going more to get a ROM of a game than buying it on the virtual console when that month's done, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a whole other matter entirely. I'll say this though, I think you're a good boy. I think you're a conscious boy, and you know what? I think you
Just
deserve.
be conscious.
Be conscious. I think that's a good message. Honestly, just try to respect the people.
Don't do things without thinking. Yeah.
Don't do things without thinking, and then like respect. If you really appreciate what a creator is doing, respect their work and pay for it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, buy a T-shirt.
And hack the NES if you can get a NES Classic. It's definitely worth it.
Yes,
I highly recommend it.
Hack the shit out of that NES, out of that SNES Classic. Nintendo, you know it's coming later this year. You know we're coming for you, Reggie. We're coming. I'm gonna put Conker's Bad Fur Day. Maybe the same bad ROM, just because it's a lot of fun. I don't know. Maybe I'll put some Banjo Tooie on there. We're gonna have the most fun.
I'll get that one there. That's a good one.
Banjo Tooie, yes. Oh, Ukulele. That game was not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have to talk about
Not
that later.
well received. Next time.
Yeah, next time we should talk. We should play Ukulele when it comes out on Switch.
Definitely.
All right. Now on that note, shake my hand on it. It's a deal.
It's a deal.
Audience, as always, I am shaking Ben's hand. Metaphysically, I am reaching out, shaking all of your hands. I wish you a good night. Ben, where can we find you online?
At Keep Pluggin LI on Twitter.
All right. And you can find, well, where else can we find you besides Twitter?
And Keep Pluggin everywhere else. Check out the YouTube.
Check out the YouTube. We just had 2 new videos come out, but every Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, every once in a while, Monday, we're going to have a brand new video for you guys. Podcast, Let's Plays, Shorts. Maybe I'll just do videos of me and Ben eating cereal for no reason.
I'm down.
Okay, let's go eat some cereal, Ben. Keep plugging.
Keep plugging.
Beautiful one. Not to say that Zelda doesn't have a really cool story and a really interesting way of characterizing